I was born into a storm. My mom was a 16-year-old drug addict, and my father was a 36-year-old Hells Angel. My dad was never around. I was raised by that single mother. And I had many men that would come in and come out and go in and go out, and drugs were always a part of that. And during those times, my mother was a victim of domestic violence over and over again. At 15 years old, my mom was in her bedroom selling drugs to this man. And I'm not really sure to this day what had happened, but something with the deal had went bad, and a scuffle happened in the hallway and came down the hallway and entered the living room. My mother attempted to block the door, and this man punched her so hard that her nose went flat. Seeing her collapse to the floor, I decided at that moment that I had had enough. And I picked a 2x4 up out of the front yard, and I swung it as hard as I could, and I hit this dude right upside the side of the head. And I began to yell at him and tell him to get out and get out. And if there weren't going to be men around my mom, I had decided that I was going to be the man to protect her. And I got punched in the back of the head and knocked to the ground. And when I went to get up, I'd realized that it was my mother who had struck me. And I began to just tell her, my heart, that I'm tired of seeing you get abused. I'm tired of the drugs. I'm tired of the men coming in and out. And she basically told me that if you don't like the way that we live, then you need to get out. And I grabbed a couple things out of my room and I walked out the front door and I slept on the streets that night. And I would stay at friends' houses, and I would stay at bus stops, and I stayed in the graveyard at some point. And during this time, my best friend Josh said, my aunt and uncle want to talk to you. And I said, about what? And they said, well, they want to talk to you. So I went over to his aunt and uncle's house. After about a year of living on the streets and going from house to house and living with friends, and they said, we want to give you a place to stay. And I moved in with them, and shortly after, they became my mom and my dad. We have a couple rules for you. You need to go back to school, and you need to go to church. And at that point, I felt like all I ever wanted in life was, people who care about me. And they were offering that. I got it saved at 17, and I knew that God was calling me to do something, and I knew that my parents wanted to see me do something. Well, I lived with my parents for a couple years until I realized I wasn't going to graduate high school on time. So at 18 years old, I decided that I'm a man now, and I'm going to do it on my own. So Christmas Eve, I didn't tell anybody. And I got on a bus, and I ran away again. And I struggled for a couple years, and at 20 years old, I had lived in now 5 or 6 different places, and I joined the Army, and I graduated July 3rd of 2001. And a couple months later, September 11th happened. And so I ended up going to Iraq in 2003 and with the initial push. And again, I went in 2005 and saw a lot of stuff that I'd like to believe that never happened. A lot of struggle, a lot of death, a lot of hurt. Watched friends pass away. I needed to run because it was getting too hard. Every time I found myself running, I would hear God calling me back. I would be reminded of the love that my parents gave me when they adopted me. I'd be reminded of the sacrifices they made to take me in and give me a better life. But in my stubbornness, I just continued to run. And I lost cars, and I lost my girlfriend, and I lost our kid. Nobody even really knows I exist. There's no pictures on the wall. All of the stuff that we owned, my girlfriend had taken back to Georgia. And I was left with a bed and a couple couches. And I just came to a moment where I said, God, if you're real, I need you to show up in this moment. I don't want to do this anymore. So it got to a point where I just set up a test. I'm going to call my buddy right now, and if he doesn't answer, I'm done. And so I walked into my garage, an empty space. And I knew that if I was to take my life at that moment, that would be the easiest place to clean it up. So at this point, it's about midnight, and I haven't talked to this guy in 5 years. I called his cell phone, and it rang, and it rang. And he picked up the phone. And he immediately was like, man, we just got done praying about you last week at church. We were wondering what happened to you. We knew you went to war, but we didn't know what had happened to you. And I just said to him on the phone, I said, Steve, God is real. God is real. He said, hey, I got church tonight. You want to hang out? And I said, man, I'd love to, but I got to figure out how to make some money. And I had a Xbox and some stuff that I thought about pawning and stuff. And he said, well, I do drywall still, and I could use somebody's hand. And we'll figure out the financial stuff. What do you need right now? And I was like, man, I haven't talked to this dude in forever. And last I talked to him, it was not on good terms. And he was pouring out his heart and letting me know that God is real. I said, there's no running from God. No matter where I went, God was there. He never left me. And slowly, God began to restore people in my life.
This is our very first ever picture together.
God started to restore finances in my life. God started to restore my relationship with my family. I was able to call my parents and begin to rebuild that relationship. And He continues to restore me. And not only have I been able to get all of my children to live under my household, He's blessed me with 3 adopted children. I cannot believe that there was a moment when I was really ready to call it a day. There was a moment when I was just going to be done. Because now I understand that no matter where I go, there He is.